Hi there. Before we start this video, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is a general overview of what happens in escrow, which I think you're really going to enjoy because if you're going to be in escrow in Southern California, this is a pretty good, robust overview. But of course, everybody's situation is different. Check with your attorney, check with escrow, check with your real estate professional, and make sure because there's going to be some things that will be different with yours, but this is a good overall generalization. I hope you enjoy it. We are officially in escrow. Congratulations. And what exactly does that mean? And what happens next? I'm going to break it down for you. So let's start with the email that you're going to get from me. And it's going to look like this. So congratulations and next step and what happens next and something to that effect in the subject line. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the fact that you're going to be needing to turn in your earnest money, but also we're going to talk about how many days we have to do different things. And all of the days start counting on the day that we actually come to what's called mutual acceptance or mutual agreement. So sometimes you might see the files, I put MA because it means mutual agreement and everybody has signed this. And that's how I save it so that I know that that one's fully executed. But as an example here, so I used one of my more recent ones. So today, Thursday, starts all the dates. So that's always day 0. Okay. So if you have 3 days to do something and it's a Thursday, then that means that you're going to have Friday, Saturday. Nope. Sorry. Well, let me back that up. You're going to have Friday, Monday, Tuesday. That was the whole point of this when it comes to your earnest money, because that is the first step. However, when it comes to everything else, you're going to also count the weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, doesn't matter if it's a holiday, it just can't end on a weekend or holiday. What do I mean by that? So we have 17 days to do most everything. That's by default. We might have changed it for our particular situation, but the average contract is going to have 17 days. So let's say you start, let's say Thursday starts, and then you count Friday 1, Saturday 2, Sunday 3, and so on all the way to day 17. If day 17 happens to end on a weekend or legal holiday, like what did we just have recently, Labor Day or something to that effect, that it's going to get pushed to the next business day. So if it lands on a Sunday, it's going to be Monday and so on. So, and I will be keeping you, you don't have to remember all this. I will be keeping you in the know on that. And that's what part of what this email is for. So, so here's what happens next. You're under contract. All the timelines begin now. So the first thing that's going to happen, this is the only one that you only count business days, and that is the earnest money. And because you are going to be wiring your earnest money to escrow, that is what the contract call for. That is the default. Now, if there is a particular situation where you're going to end up actually taking a cashier's check or something to that effect, that's a different story. But 9 times out of 10 or more, we're going to be doing a wire. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to wait for escrow to give you wiring instructions. Now, here's the thing. When you get those wiring instructions, what you want to do is you want to call escrow at the phone number that I'm going to put here. Okay, so you're going to see this in your email. You're going to call escrow before you wire the money, and you're going to say, hey, I'm about to wire the funds. I want to confirm that these are the correct wiring instructions. Now, why does that happen? Because of wire fraud. In fact, I had an interesting thing happen just a couple of days ago where even I got tricked into clicking a link and I redid everything. I have 2-factor authentication on like everything on my computer, but I even got tricked into clicking a link that looked like it was from First American Title, and it wasn't. I was just going through my emails quickly or whatever. So what happens is that scammers try to get into your email address. They can hack in pretty easily when it's just Gmail or Hotmail or whatever. And they try to see if you're going to be doing anything that's like a big purchase that you're going to have to wire funds. So what they try to do is they try to intercept you and say, hey, because they might see this email from me and it says WFG title with Leah is going to be your title company or your escrow, actually the escrow company in this case. but it's going to be your escrow company. And so then they try to intercept that and then send you an email that looks like it's from them, but instead it's from a scammer, and they give you different wiring instructions. And the reason I'm spending so much time on this is because I do not want this to happen to anybody at all, and certainly not anybody that I work with. So it's really important that you make that phone call, and escrow is waiting for you to make that phone call. So I'm going to give you the phone number, the correct phone number, where to call them, so that it's just the direct line. You're going to call the office, and so it's going to answer you, say, hey, I have this escrow. I need to wire my earnest money or by down payment, because both are going to be wired that way. And I just want to confirm my wiring instructions. And they are so happy to do that because they don't want this to happen to you either. Okay, so moving right along. So as you notice here, so this was a Thursday, so Friday, Monday, Tuesday. So in this case, Tuesday, the earnest money was due, and actually wasn't this much. It was actually another amount, but I think I fixed that. So in Coachella Valley, we typically see, and it's not, it's not chiseled into stone or anything, but it is customary that you will be putting 3% down per your earnest money. And actually, in this particular case, the earnest money was closer to 20 something thousand, but just FYI, it's not usually 5,000. I just wanted to point that out. Now, let's move right along. So you're going to get your earnest money in, and we need to get it in on time because the seller, the seller has some options too. So heaven forbid they have a backup offer waiting for them that might be more than yours. Not happening that much right now, but it still could happen. You just want to make sure that we're following the contract, we're getting everything done as soon as possible. So contingency period. So that's going to be 17 days for a lot of things. What are some of those things? One of them could be the inspection, very important. Looking through the documents from the homeowners association, reviewing the preliminary title, getting your insurance. Insurance is key right now. You want to start that process early. And if you need a referral for a good insurance agent, you just let me know and I will get you some options. Okay. But you have a lot of different options as far as your contingency period. So what is a contingency period? And most people know this, but just in case you don't, or it's been a long time since you bought and sold a home, the contingency period is basically just a period of time that's protecting your earnest money as the buyer. So if you put down this 3%, and it could be range anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 depending on the price of the home that you're buying, and we want to protect that money so that in case you do decide that you don't want to keep moving forward, that money will come back to you. Because if you have a good reason, and that's what contingency periods are for, then you can back out and keep your earnest money. Now, if you have removed your contingencies, now we have a problem. So you will know that you've removed your contingencies because it will be a contingency removal form that you are signing. Okay. Now, it is appropriate to remove your contingencies in a reasonable amount of time. You don't want to hold the seller hostage, but you need to make sure. So, like for instance, appraisal is one contingency. So if you're not paying cash and you are getting a loan, you're going to have an appraisal. Now, if the appraisal comes in and it's fine, or it's even high, sometimes that happens, and the seller won't know that. You will know it as the buyer, but that's it. So if the if the appraisal comes in and it's at value, which is usually what we say, so it's either at the price that you're offering or it's more, then you're fine. You're done with the appraisal. You should remove that appraisal contingency. We can remove them one at a time. We can remove them all at the same time. It really depends on the circumstances of your particular escrow, but a lot of times they're going to be happening in clumps. A couple are removed here, a couple are removed there. The first one that usually goes is the investigation contingency, or at least the structural inspection portion of that investigation contingency. So once you've had your inspection done, now is your time to go back, and you're going to be able to renegotiate with the seller unless everything's fine. Sometimes, honestly, people are like, you know what, this inspection was great. I'm good. I don't want anything. Maybe not a good deal. Maybe not a bunch of money off the seller. Give me a really good amount. And at this point, the inspection's so clean, I'm happy to move forward. It's your call. But basically, you're going to be, usually renegotiating with the seller in that you will probably want a few things fixed, or maybe you just want to credit so that you can get it fixed after the fact. Sometimes that works out better because you get to pick the person who's fixing it, somebody you feel comfortable with. You're getting a credit towards your closing costs. It usually cannot be more than 3%. So we need to speak to your lender. If you're paying cash, you can kind of do whatever you want. But it's closing costs is money that's coming out of your pocket that can be paid for by the seller. The seller cannot contribute to your down payment, but they can contribute to your closing costs. So if you had negotiated a situation where okay, this is how much we're going to buy the house for, and we will be paying our own closing costs, which is customary, especially right now. And then you look at some stuff and oh, this is going to be a $5,000 cost, and my closing costs are going to be $15,000, right? You can go back to the seller and say, hey, I would like a $5,000 credit towards my closing costs. And whereas before you were going to have to bring in $15,000 plus your down payment, now you're only going to have to bring in $10,000 plus your down payment. So that's actually cash in your pocket versus reducing the price of the home. If you reduce the price of the home and you're paying cash, well then yes, because it's cash out of your pocket as well. But if you reduce the price of the home and it's not, and you're getting a loan, well, if you get $5,000 off the price of the home, it really doesn't change your payment that much. Very little bit of money. And by the time you actually get that $5,000 back, I mean, it's been years of making payments, right? Whereas the money that you're going to have to come in and coming out of pocket, that's a different story. And that's kind of money right now in your hands. So just something to keep in mind. Sometimes, and it depends on the type of loan you're getting, sometimes the stuff just has to be fixed prior to closing. FHA, VA loans do tend to be that way. I don't want to get in too much of the weeds here, because if you are getting an FHA or VA loan, we could have that conversation. But basically just know that once you're in there, you're going to be able to do your inspection and you're going to be able to negotiate with the seller if there's anything that you want fixed. At that point, then, your contingency is still in place. Now, it will say on the contingency, or on the inspection rather, that, if the seller agrees to do these fixes, that your contingency will then be automatically removed, basically. That's really the only time that happens, and people still want it in writing. So just FYI, so that's something you're going to be working on. Now, another contingency might have to do with, say, your review of the seller's disclosures. So the sellers will have 3 disclosures that they are statutorily required to give you: the seller property and questionnaire, the TDS, the transfer disclosure statement, and what we call the NHD, the Natural Hazards Disclosure Report. So if you hear SPQ, TDS, or NHD, those are the statutory required disclosures from the seller. Now, let's say you've got 17-day contingency period, but you don't get those disclosures until day 15. It doesn't matter. You will get 5 days to review no matter what. So if you get them on day 15, you're going to have till day 20 to review them. It's totally fine. Don't feel like you're going to be rushed just because the seller was late in getting those to you. Some other things that fall under that same category would be the preliminary title report and the homeowners association documents, which, by the way, the seller is required to pay for. So the seller will pay for, unless it has been negotiated otherwise, and again, you will know it because we will have a whole conversation about it. The seller is required to pay for the homeowners association documents and provide those for you. They're required to pay for the NHD, the Natural Hazards Disclosure Report, and get that to you. They're also required to fill out the SPQ and the TDS. Potentially, it could be what we call an exempt seller disclosure, an ESD. The ESD is when somebody inherits the house, as an example, and they don't know anything about the house. They haven't lived in the house, but they have to fill out a form, and usually the answer is a lot of I don't know. But they might know something, and then they need to put that down. But outside of that, it's a lot of I don't know. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. So when you get those, you are always going to have 5 days to review, even if you're getting it late in the game of that 17-day contingency protection period. It's really earnest money protection period is what contingency means. This is contingent on me doing a home inspection, and I'd have put up this earnest money, but if I don't like it, if I do the home inspection and there's so much more wrong with the house that even if you fixed it, I kind of don't want it anymore, I'm going to keep my earnest money and I'm going to move along. Okay, so that's your option. Or you say, no, everything's fine, or yes, the seller has agreed to fix everything to make me happy. And so, yes, I will be moving forward with this deal. And then I will sign the contingency removal form and make it official. After that, you cannot back out because of the inspection in that particular case, or once you've signed off on all of your contingencies, which usually happens right towards the end, quite frankly, then you will be, putting your earnest money at risk. Okay, moving right along. So, and I do try to, have this all written up in the email that this is coming in. So, closing process and important milestones. So, your closing date, it's fluid. Don't get too married to it right out of the gate. Honestly, there's so many different things that can happen that will make that change. Now, if you are renting somewhere, I usually recommend that you do not give notice until all of the contingencies are removed, you're happy, your loan is approved, the appraisals come in, and everything's fine, because you might find yourself homeless or kind of pushed into buying a house that really didn't want to buy, so there's that potential too, and we don't want that. So the best thing we do, and now you're saying, okay, well, yeah, but Lisa, I had a 30-day notice I have to give to where I'm renting, and we're going to be 15, 16, 20 days in before this happens. Well, I will tell you, if you have that extra time, if you have that overlap of say 2 weeks or so, you're going to be happy. You're going to be happy that you have that extra time to move out. When you get your loan, and most people notice that, again, most people only buy a handful of houses, even in their lifetime. Even if you bought several, you might forget that when you get a loan on the house, so let's say you close on October 15th, your first payment, it's not going to be November, it's going to be December that first payment is due, because your payments are paid in arrears. So when you have closing costs, part of that will be the 15 days in October, or 16, because they have 31 days, the 16 days in October that you will own that home, okay? That's why November 1st, you don't owe a payment, because you already paid it with your closing costs. Then in December 1st, you will be paying November's accrued interest and principal, okay? So something to keep in mind, which means that if you're renting somewhere, a lot of times it doesn't, like you're not going to have that payment. You're going to have double payments that first month. And it's going to give you a lot. You're going to be so happy. It's a luxury, and maybe it's a luxury you can't afford, and I totally get that. And you're like, I'm going to take the chance, and I'll get an Airbnb if I need to in between times. And that's totally your call. But just know that it's if you can do it that way, it's going to make your life a lot easier. The final walkthrough, I actually just did one of those today. So that is going to be one of the last things that we do together. It's one of the last forms that I'm going to need from you, most likely. Sometimes we'll clean up that file at the last minute, but when you do your final walkthrough, we're going to go back to the house. For instance, in this particular house today, we had asked for the air conditioning to be fixed. So when we got there, and the listing agent we worked with on this one was really good. She already had the air conditioner on. Sellers are not living there, so she went ahead and went in and made sure the air conditioner was on so we could feel that it was working, right? So we're going to say, anything we can see, touch, or whatever is something that we can take a look at and make sure that we're good to go. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Anyway, something stuck on my tongue. But so if you go in and, we're going to look for basically that everything's been kept in, appropriate condition. They kept up with the pool maintenance, right? The pool isn't green, or, they kept up with the yard maintenance, which is what they're supposed to do. They have to deliver the home to you in a reasonable care with how you saw it the first time you saw it. Okay. They can't just let everything go crazy just because now you're under contract, because a month with a pool not being taken care of or any number of things can really go wrong. So we're going to show up. We're going to make sure now. This is not a contingency. This is not a reason to back out. What it is basically it's memorializing the condition of the home on the day that we saw it prior to closing. So you didn't do this. This was done by the seller. Most of the time, the answer on our verification of property is that nothing's noted. In other words, it's fine. It looks exactly like we expected. The things are done the way we expected. We'll also get, like, let's say the air conditioner was fixed. We're also going to get an invoice from the air conditioning company that fixed it so that we have that to return to if anything were to happen, etc. Okay. Sellers are allowed to do fixes, but they have to do it in a commercially reasonable manner. In other words, if you're a seller fixing something, you better know what you're doing because you're going to be held with the same standards as a licensed professional. You really probably don't want that. You're better off handing that liability to somebody else. I'm just going to say, it's your call. You're going to be signing your closing disclosure, and that's going to happen 3 days prior to when you can actually sign your loan documents. Okay. That's going to happen at escrow or with a mobile notary. Another reason you don't actually have to be here in the valley in order to have your home closed. You can show up whenever you want. And a lot of people, that's what's going on. Like maybe you're buying something in August and you don't want to come here till November. No problem. We can take care of all of that for you. And the mobile notary will come to wherever you are in the world and get that taken care of. If it's outside of the country, it does get a little more complicated, but we do it. So just so you know. So signing the closing docs, that's how that's going to happen. Then you're going to close and get your keys. So on the last day when we're actually closing, so let's say you signed all your loan documents on Monday and you sent you a wire for your down payment. Usually that same day, the lender or the next day will be sending actually, it's usually the next day. The lender's going to then send the money to escrow also. So when escrow has your down payment money and the loan's money, right, the lender's money, now they have 100% of the funds needed to close, okay? Once that 100% of funds that's needed to close is at escrow, they will let title know we are ready to record or we are released for recording. Those are some of the phrases that you will hear. So when that happens, it means title, so that's escrow. Now title's going to pick up the baton and go to the county and get this recorded for you, okay? So when that happens, you're going to actually, when the county gives you a number, and they really are giving it to you, they're giving it to title, but they're giving it to you. This recording number is the number that's associated with the fact that it went from the seller's name to your name. The property is now yours. As soon as that happens, unless we have put in there otherwise, or the seller asks for something else, you get to move in. You get your keys. It's all yours. It's your house at that point. So, and now again, if you're out of the area, what I usually do is I'll put a combo box on the house so that whenever you show up, you'll have the code and you can just go get your keys, or you're going to let me know when you're going to come and I will get your keys to you. And that's whether you're here or if you're out of the area. So whenever you're available to get your keys, as soon as we've recorded, I will have that taken care of for you. So one thing to keep in mind too, though, don't schedule for the day of closing. Don't schedule the movers for that day, because unless you're coming, it's going to be a long drive. You're going to not probably get your keys. I mean, we don't usually record until like the very end of the day. So if you think you're going to be starting to move at 8 a.m., it's not usually going to happen. Okay. So make sure that you're going to be, getting that moving company out for the next day earliest. And honestly, I'd probably push it out one more day if I can, if it logistically works for you. I actually did a whole other video about selling and buying at the same time and doing what they call a simultaneous close. And there's a lot of sort of tricks and ticks. That's the one that's for that I share with you on how to make sure that goes smoothly. So now utilities, put it on your calendar that you're going to want to transfer the utilities into your name, and you're going to want to call the utilities a few days before. Now, technically, the seller is responsible for the day of closing, but I can't tell you how often they actually have the utilities taken out of their name on that day. And then by the next day, you've got the power company is going to put a sign on you and say, we cut you off. You're done. right? And then all of a sudden the gas company cuts you off, and now you have to wait for somebody to come out and turn it on for you. And that's the gas, not really power. But basically, it's even though technically the seller is responsible for that day of closing, it is probably best that you go ahead and just put it in your name for that day. Especially, if you're just calling them a couple days prior to, you're going to know exactly when you're going to be out of closing, and so then you can have that transfer happen. So then we'll get you utility list one way or another, and then the wire fraud again. Reminder for the wire fraud: always call. Now, as we move through this, I'm going to be keeping you on track, knowing what forms we need to get signed, and, letting, and always, if you just have questions, please let me know. And I can always sit down with you and go over everything. If you're in town, we can sit down and have coffee. If you're out of town, we can get on a Zoom or a call, whatever is for you. Sometimes Zooms are nice because I can show you things on the screen and it might make a little bit more sense, but that's just something to keep in mind. If there's ever anything that is kind of stressing you out about the process, not knowing what's coming next, I want you to give me a call or a text kind of whenever. Honestly, I tend to go to bed kind of early. I will admit that. That if I see your text and I can answer a question that helps you sleep better at night, I'm going to answer you. The only time I'm not going to answer you is because I'm already asleep. And it or I went to sleep shortly after and I hadn't checked my phone before I did so. So, honestly, if it's 8:30 and not answering, I might be asleep. I a lot of times I get up around 5. That's why I'm usually asleep. And but anyway, so just something to keep in mind. Some of the other things, if this feels overwhelming, definitely know that this is, it is for everybody. And even when my husband and I have bought properties together, he'll both of us get stressed. It's never easy. This is never an easy, stress-free process. My job is to try and make it as stress-free as possible. And I always feel like with the most information, you can feel like, when you're moving forward confidently with knowledge, I feel like that's going to make your life a lot better. Now, let me just make sure, was there anything else I wanted to bring up to you? No, I think that was pretty much it. So, yeah, earnest money, inspection, closing date. Yeah, that's pretty much it. One thing to keep in mind too, just is let's talk about a couple of things actually that do get confused, even with people who have bought and sold properties many times. So escrow is a neutral third party that basically just handles the inflow and outflow of the money and a handful of other things like ordering homeowners association documents and things like that. If you're the seller, they're going to help you with that. So that's escrow. Inspector versus appraiser. This actually comes up a lot as well. So an inspector is the person who works for you. One of the only out-of-pocket costs you're going to have, in addition to earnest money, is your inspection. Those are going to run usually from $400 to $700, depending on who you pick. And I will have plenty of referrals for you as well, because not everybody knows a home inspector. So they'll run anywhere from $400 to $700. Some lenders do require that you pay your appraisal upfront too. That's going to be around the same price, about maybe $600, give or take. And so sometimes that's your other out-of-pocket costs. So other than moving, those should be your only out-of-pocket costs until you actually sit down and send your deposit and your closing costs to escrow. All right. So appraisal versus inspector. The inspector is the person who works for you, who's there to look at the house. They usually take 2 to 3 hours to do this. If it's a smaller condo, it could be an hour and a half or something. But they usually take 2 to 3 hours to do the home inspection. They're going to go through everything and they work for you. The appraiser works for the bank, right? I mean, you get to pay them, but they work for the bank. So the inspector is looking at the structural soundness of the property. The appraiser is looking at the market value of the property. So those two things do tend to get confused sometimes. The appraisal, if it's low, it's another point of negotiation, by the way. And the appraisers can call out for repairs, okay? Especially with USDA, FHA, or VA loans.
Conventional, it almost never happens, but I have seen it happen.
So when the appraiser calls out for something to be repaired or replaced, it actually has to be done prior to closing. All right, just something to keep in mind. The inspector calls for something to be repaired or replaced. It doesn't have to. It's whatever you and the seller agree to. Okay. And it's up to you if you want to agree to what the seller is okay with or isn't okay with, right? That's in another negotiation point. But if the appraiser calls something out and says it must be fixed, it must be fixed prior to closing, or you're not going to get the loan and you're not going to close. So, something to keep in mind. Let's see, is there anything else? I think that's pretty much it. So, this is your escrow period. I feel like, and you can come back to this email as much as you want. Of course, you could always call and ask me questions, but I feel like having this video to kind of walk you through, I feel like it empowers people to understand like what's going to happen next. I feel like when your expectations are set properly, that it can give you some peace during this process that can be pretty stressful. So, thank you again so much for choosing me to help you with this process, and I can't wait to see you at the inspection.